Paper 76, The Second Garden. When Adam elected to leave the first garden to the Nodites unopposed, he and his followers could not go west, for the Edenites had no boat suitable for such a marine adventure. They could not go north. The northern Nodites were already on the march toward Eden. They feared to go south. The hills of that region were infested with hostile tribes. The only way open was to the east, and so they journeyed eastward toward the then pleasant regions between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and many of those who were left behind later journeyed eastward to join the Adamites in their new valley home. Cain and Sansa were born before the Adamic caravan had reached its destination between the rivers in Mesopotamia. Laata, the mother of Sansa, perished at the birth of her daughter. Eve suffered much but survived, owing to superior strength. Eve took Sansa, the child of Laata, to her bosom, and she was reared along with Cain. Sansa grew up to be a woman of great ability. She became the wife of Sargon, the chief of the northern blue races, and contributed to the advancement of the blue men of those times. 1. The Edenites enter Mesopotamia. It required almost a full year for the caravan of Adam to reach the Euphrates River. Finding it in flood tide, they remained camped on the plains west of the stream almost 6 weeks before they made their way across to the land between the rivers, which was to become the second garden. When word had reached the dwellers in the land of the second garden that the king and high priest of the Garden of Eden was marching on them, they had fled in haste to the eastern mountains. Adam found all of the desired territory vacated when he arrived, and here in this new location Adam and his helpers set themselves to work to build new homes and establish a new center of culture and religion. This site was known to Adam as one of the 3 original selections of the committee assigned to choose possible locations for the garden proposed by Van and Amadon. The 2 rivers themselves were a good natural defense in those days, and a short way north of the second garden, the Euphrates and Tigris came close together, so that a defense wall extending 56 miles could be built for the protection of the territory to the south and between the rivers. After getting settled in the new Eden, it became necessary to adopt crude methods of living. It seemed entirely true that the ground had been cursed. Nature was once again taking its course. Now were the Adamites compelled to wrest a living from unprepared soil and to cope with the realities of life in the face of the natural hostilities and incompatibilities of mortal existence. They found the first garden partially prepared for them, but the second had to be created by the labor of their own hands and in the sweat of their faces. 2. Cain and Abel. Less than 2 years after Cain's birth, Abel was born, the first child of Adam and Eve to be born in the second garden. When Abel grew up to the age of 12 years, he elected to be a herder. Cain had chosen to follow agriculture. Now in those days it was customary to make offerings to the priesthood of the things at hand. Herders would bring of their flocks, farmers of the fruits of the fields. And in accordance with this custom, Cain and Abel likewise made periodic offerings to the priests. The 2 boys had many times argued about the relative merits of their vocations, and Abel was not slow to note that preference was shown for his animal sacrifices. In vain did Cain appeal to the traditions of the first Eden, to the former preference for the fruits of the fields. But this Abel would not allow, and he taunted his brother in his discomfiture. In the days of the first Eden, Adam had indeed sought to discourage the offerings of animal sacrifice, so that Cain had a justifiable precedent for his contentions. It was, however, difficult to organize the religious life of the second Eden. Adam was burdened with 1,001 details associated with the work of building, defense, and agriculture. Being much depressed spiritually, he entrusted the organization of worship and education to those of Nodite extraction who had served in these capacities in the first garden, and in even so short a time the officiating Nodite priests were reverting to the standards and rulings of pre-Adamic times. The 2 boys never got along well, and this matter of sacrifices further contributed to the growing hatred between them. Abel knew he was the son of both Adam and Eve, and never failed to impress upon Cain that Adam was not his father. Cain was not pure violet, as his father was of the Nodite race, later admixed with the blue and the red man, and with the aboriginal Andonic stock. And all of this, with Cain's natural bellicose inheritance, caused him to nourish an ever-increasing hatred for his younger brother. The boys were respectively 18 and 20 years of age when the tension between them was finally resolved one day, when Abel's taunts so infuriated his bellicose brother that Cain turned upon him in wrath and slew him. The observation of Abel's conduct establishes the value of environment and education as factors in character development. Abel had an ideal inheritance, and heredity lies at the bottom of all character. But the influence of an inferior environment virtually neutralized this magnificent inheritance. Abel, especially during his younger years, was greatly influenced by his unfavorable surroundings. He would have become an entirely different person had he lived to be 25 or 30. His superb inheritance would then have shown itself. While a good environment cannot contribute much toward really overcoming the character handicaps of a base heredity, a bad environment can very effectively spoil an excellent inheritance, at least during the younger years of life. Good social environment and proper education are indispensable soil and atmosphere for getting the most out of a good inheritance. The death of Abel became known to his parents when his dogs brought the flocks home without their master. To Adam and Eve, Cain was fast becoming the grim reminder of their folly, and they encouraged him in his decision to leave the garden. Cain's life in Mesopotamia had not been exactly happy, since he was in such a peculiar way symbolic of the default. It was not that his associates were unkind to him, but he had not been unaware of their subconscious resentment of his presence. But Cain knew that, since he bore no tribal mark, he would be killed by the first neighboring tribesman who might chance to meet him. Fear and some remorse led him to repent. Cain had never been indwelt by an adjuster, had always been defiant of the family discipline and disdainful of his father's religion. But he now went to Eve, his mother, and asked for spiritual help and guidance. And when he honestly sought divine assistance, an adjuster indwelt him. And this adjuster, dwelling within and looking out, gave Cain a distinct advantage of superiority, which classed him with the greatly feared tribe of Adam. And so Cain departed for the land of Nod, east of the second Eden. He became a great leader among one group of his father's people, and did, to a certain degree, fulfill the predictions of Sareptatia, for he did promote peace between this division of the Nodites and the Adamites throughout his lifetime. Cain married Ramona, his distant cousin, and their first son, Enoch, became the head of the Elamite Nodites, and for hundreds of years the Elamites and the Adamites continued to be at peace. 3. Life in Mesopotamia. As time passed in the second garden, the consequences of default became increasingly apparent. Adam and Eve greatly missed their former home of beauty and tranquility, as well as their children who had been deported to Urantia. It was indeed pathetic to observe this magnificent couple reduced to the status of the common flesh of the realm, but they bore their diminished estate with grace and fortitude. Adam wisely spent most of the time training his children and their associates in civil administration, educational methods, and religious devotions. Had it not been for this foresight, pandemonium would have broken loose upon his death. As it was, the death of Adam made little difference in the conduct of the affairs of his people. But long before Adam and Eve passed away, they recognized that their children and followers had gradually learned to forget the days of their glory in Eden, and it was better for the majority of their followers that they did forget the grandeur of Eden. They were not so likely to experience undue dissatisfaction with their less fortunate environment. The civil rulers of the Adamites were derived hereditarily from the sons of the first garden. Adam's first son, Adamson, Adam ben Adam, founded a secondary center of the violet race to the north of the second Eden. Adam's second son, Eve's son, became a masterly leader and administrator.